Welcome to this Film Fest DC conversation with four filmmakers from the Short Stories 2 program. Thanks to my shorts co-curator, Juliet Birch, who lives in the DC area, and the filmmakers gathered here from all over for making this program possible. I'm Linda Blackaby, senior programmer for the festival and based in Yelamu, now San Francisco. I acknowledged my location here on the unceded territories of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who, along with hundreds of other Native communities, have resided in California for thousands of years. Each of these filmmakers has a really unique voice, intention, formal strategy, and story to tell. I'd like to first ask each of them to please introduce yourself to our viewers, say a little bit, and we'll start on the West Coast with Valerie.
Hello, I'm Valerie Soe. I'm the director of Radical Care, the Auntie Sewing Squad, and I'm a filmmaker and mostly experimental documentaries, and I'm also a member of the Auntie Sewing Squad.
And Jessica?
Hello, Jessica Q. Moore from Brooklyn, New York. I am the writer, director, editor, producer of Last Summer on Bainbridge Street. And I'm Brooklyn born and raised, and I'm excited to be here and tell you about the film.
Drew?
Hi, I'm Drew Durepos. I'm based in Chicago. I'm a filmmaker and educator, and I made Former Sinners of the Future. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Alisi?
Hi, my name is Alisi. I'm a Canadian artist of Mongolian origin, and I'm currently in Berlin, Germany. I'm working on my next project. I'm the director of the short film The Fourfold. It's an animated film. Thank you.
Thank you. Your films are completely different, I had said before, but I think that each of them is transformative in its own way, changes a narrative, reframes an event, or reclaims a concept, presenting the possibility of change. Or perhaps that's just the magic that good art makes. We'll see. The first question that I'd like all of you to answer is, what inspired you to become an artist, a filmmaker? Was it any particular event, film, artist, teacher, epiphany? Maybe to start with Jessica, and then speak up whenever you're ready, the rest of you.
Thank you. Okay. That is a tough one. I was always into just storytelling in general. I come from a Caribbean background, and so there's just a lot of storytelling within my family. And I think with film in particular, I fell in love with film when I started watching foreign movies, really, when I saw that there's other perspectives out there and other ways to tell stories in a really humanistic way that isn't sensationalized as much. And so I was really interested in, Raise the Red Lantern was really influential for me, a lot of Imu Jong's early films. And so with Last Summer on Bainbridge Street in particular, for me, at least I see some Italian neorealistic sort of tie-ins just from the way it's shot and the story. So for me, it's about the humanistic element of connecting with people and relating about their stories and struggles.
Hello. I've been loved film all my life. I mean, I think both my parents loved film, and I was a big reader too. And it's just part of how the older I get, the more I see film as not just less interested in the commercial applications of it, and more interested in as a individuation process or a kind of personality building process. I mean, even my film, I'm usually working something out in my practice. And so that's some of the value I take from it now. But also just classic storytelling and movies and movies growing up. I'm kind of omnivorous in my interests. So, and I think a lot of my work goes in different directions. So this was kind of an interest in specific formal strategies in this one. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Alisi?
Yes, yeah, it's a difficult question. But since I was young, I've been always interested in art. And when I was studying in Montreal, Canada, I went to a film school by chance, and I studied film animation. But the school where I studied was really promoting this independent, this auteur film, auteur animation. And then I was very inspired by the work of the South African artist William Kantridge. And he makes this prints and under camera animation, like really independent voice and story. So I was very inspired by his work, and I stayed in animation and continued.
So I've always been interested in using film as a tool for social change and activism, kind of taking cues from third cinema, Latin American cinema, and so forth, and how film can be used as a means of making the world a better place. So integrated with other social movements.
And then each of your films seems to me to be in some way, and this is probably an easy question from the point of view position of being an insider, not an outsider in terms of what you're shooting. Can you each quickly comment on how, if that's true, and how your film derives from your roots, experiences, etc.?
It's interesting you talk a little bit about inside, outside. Yes, I am inside. I am an insider as a person growing up in Bed-Stuy who has made a film based in Bed-Stuy. Like, my grandmother is the grandmother in the film, and, you know, she's from Tobago. I grew up in a Caribbean household, so I very much know the life, but I don't know if you also know, like, Sister Outsider, the book, like Audre Lorde's book. There's also this sort of otherness that comes. So when someone talks about like inside and outside, there is a sort of otherness, even though you're inside. There is this other perspective, like, you know, just being queer, or like I'm also like Jewish. And so that's just, there's a lot of different intersections going on when it comes about like inside and outside. But yes, as an insider, it did help with creating a lot of the realism of the film last summer. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, watching your movie, I really got a sense that you knew that neighborhood pretty well. I feel like that might be your apartment. I'm just guessing, but no, maybe not.
It's the apartment I grew up in. That is my grandmother. There's a lot of people who are just in the neighborhood who I know who are just around in the film. So yes, it's very much a community project of getting it together and done.
Totally.
Your grandmother was awesome, by the way.
Yeah, she was amazing. Yeah, so like I said, I am a member of the Auntie Sewing Squad. So the whole movie was crowdsourced, meaning that since we couldn't shoot during the pandemic, right, of course, I just posted on our Facebook page and asked the aunties to send me clips of them sewing. And then I asked them some questions about what was relevant about what we were doing as far as sewing masks for, for the pandemic and for all these communities that had been abandoned by the idiocy of the Trump administration. So that way, I think it really facilitated getting a lot of the footage because I already had a relationship with the people in the squad. You know, I'm already an auntie, so they knew that they could trust me with making sure that our collective story was told accurately. Yeah, and I think that really helped as far as being part of the group itself. Mm-hmm.
Alisi?
Yes, so my film is an animated film, but it's based on this interview of my grandmother. And my grandmother talked about this traditional Mongolian view of nature and how nature is considered as alive, as a person. It's kind of considered as animistic. Animistic is basically considered that nature, mountain, rocks, and they are considered as alive, as almost as a person. So in this way, humans have respect for nature. So I interviewed my grandmother. She talked about these traditional rituals, how nature was worshipped in the past. Even right now, some of the rituals have survived after the Soviet oppressions. And then there are lots of indigenous rituals have survived. So I interviewed my grandmother, and that was my project. And I realized that there's so much wisdom of what she told in our contemporary moment because of this climate change and this human-induced environmental change. And then there are lots of wisdom in what she told me. So that's how I made the film.
It's so the insider outsider question is interesting. It's this one is very like a personal essay, kind of documenting disparate moments in a friendship, like one of my longest relationships, best friend, and thinking about trajectories and kind of, so it's pretty intimate, right? But also thinking about, there's definitely subtexts of like education or privilege, and also like roots and like, you know, my hometown and like keeping up with somebody. But I mean, I'm still really close with the main subject, and the film came out of that conversation, like that's alluded to. Like, so I was trying to like document real, like fulfill kind of like the promise of the conversation that's discussed at the end of the film. So
Great. I mean, I think we could have a great conversation about grandmothers in film. Drew has one called Elder Abuse. It's worth looking at sometime. Maybe I'll go to Jessica first, and let's talk a little bit about this story of neighbors from a different backgrounds in a gentrifying area, where that came from, and
the genesis of the idea, or just gentrification itself. Well, obviously I grew up in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, and over the decades I've seen the change of the condos coming up, the change of the types of businesses who are patrons of specific businesses and who are not in the same community, you know, even living next to each other. I remember I read this article with Spike Lee about his father in Fort Greene, and how his father, someone called the police on his father, and then my father was also harassed by police as well. And to me, it was just like, well, this could just happen to anyone of certain populations. Like, this could just happen to anyone. Anyone could just be harassed by the police in our community, especially, you know, Black men. So the first sort of iteration of the idea, it was kind of like it was different. It was more of like a Black Liberation Army thing, but you know, it's obviously very toned down now. But I wanted to take it from a child's perspective, specifically because I was thinking, if I was in this situation with my father, because I was very attached to my father as well. And I think that the bonds that father and sons have are very important. And you don't see a lot of father-son relationships in the Black community in movies at times, so that are really positive. And I thought it would be really great to explore that, and explore a child who has a significant loss and sees something that's really traumatic, and tries to figure a way to navigate that, and try to figure out race relations and gentrification, and like just a changing neighborhood in general, and especially like pressures from even within his own family, like the grandmother, of just like, you know, well, you know, the neighborhood's changing, they're doing this, the rent prices are going up. So yes, I feel like I needed to make it, and I always feel, not that I have to make political films, but I do feel that there needs to be some social commentary, or just some sort of point in what you're trying to say, and some sort of perspective and voice.
I mean, we see the grandmother say, "Oh my God," and that gets her off of the phone, right? When Tyshawn comes up and says that they've arrested his father, she knows what the possibilities are. I think every shot, every scene has a meaning. I think it's not as straightforward drama as it seems to be. So, you know, the walk around that the father takes his son to see the neighborhood when they're playing, and it's not just a straight trip to the grocery store. Jessica, can you talk a little bit about how you chose locations and what we saw about the neighborhood, especially when the father goes with the son to the where I thought they were just going to get to the grocery store, but no.
Yes, I can actually talk about the locations because these are all locations that I know very well, except for one. So I had two other people help me produce, John Patrick Hayden and Maggie Kamal. Shout out if you see this. um, I picked most of the locations, and I know like John's area was Bushwick, and I know Bushwick specifically had a lot of construction because Bed-Stuy was already sort of getting built up, and there's a lot of brownstone, so things weren't really getting built as much. But I knew where he was living had more construction sites or more new type of buildings that I was looking for. So for the construction site that they passed as they're going to the grocery store, getting the lottery tickets, I picked that out specifically as just like the new development, something new. Like this was an ice cream store, and the ice cream store isn't there anymore. It's gone. It's going to be something else now. It's going to be more residential houses. Before, in the script, in an early version, it was like a cafe. But of course, there's reasons we couldn't. But Fulton Street Park, my dad and I used to play Fulton Street Park. We used to play soccer there, just like at the exact same place where I shot the soccer scene. The block that they walk down is the same block as the house, so all the locations were chosen specifically, I guess not as memories, but as places that you would know if you lived in that part of Bed-Stuy. But it's also changing.
Yeah, it's complicated. I was thinking about gentrification, and one of the things that's wrong with it too is that the new people in the neighborhood never make an effort to get to know the people who are already there. And
Right.
I thought you showed that really, really nicely in your film, until there's a need for the reparative justice of the grandmother.
Right. See, yes, the gentrification is it's so complex because, like, me personally, like, I don't think the issue is that people are moving in. Like, I don't think diversity is good on its own. People should share cultures and ideas. Like, as I just said earlier, one of the influential movies for me was Imu Jong, and that was in China, and then my dad grew up with a lot of karate movies because he came from Trinidad, and that's what was showing in the 70s. So there's just a lot of cross-cultural things in general. But I think the issue is that when people start getting priced out and people aren't working together as a community to make the community better and to just, work together, which is what I was trying to reckon with in my film, is that, there are these there are two neighbors with different cultural backgrounds, and, they have preconceived notions or ideas about each other. But in the end, they do need to work together in order to form community. And at the end, they do need to get past it together as people. And, maybe fight realtors or fight some sort of system that's creating these, enormous rent prices. Because Valerie, even in San Francisco, it's, right?
Yeah. I don't know, Valerie, do you want to talk about rent prices in San Francisco? The first film I saw of Valerie was called All Orientals Look the Same. It was back in 1986, and the film disproves that kind of darkly humorous title. I do want to let you know she has a blog Beyond Asiaphilia, with music, pop culture, and stuff. So maybe talking about the topic of this, could you talk a little bit about how this story of Asian American and Asian women is really counter to the perception of the meek sewing woman and Asian
Sure.
women in sweatshops? And
Well, I mean, I think we're totally embracing the idea of Asian women in sweatshops. A lot of the people who are in the group, their moms or their grandmas or their aunts did work in the garment industry. I think my grandmother did that at one point, but it was really amazing how many people had that background. But I do think it's funny because you're talking about like kind of like kin ties, you know, and like grandmas. And so we use that word auntie in a similar way, even though we're not blood related. We all are kind of related, you know, culturally related, politically related, whatever. And I think that that's a really great term. I think most people have relatively positive associations with the word auntie. Like you love your aunties maybe more than you would love your moms in some ways. Because your moms, you have like tension, right? So I think that that was part of it too. But also in a lot of Asian cultures, Chinese cultures for sure, anybody who is of your parents' generation who's a female who's, you know, then she's your auntie, even if she is not even like blood related. Like my mother's best friend is Japanese American, and we always called her auntie, even though I'm Chinese. And it's like for a while, it's like, how could she be our aunt if she's like Japanese? We don't understand that. But so it's kind of a respectful term for an older woman that you use, yeah. And so we kind of made that this all-encompassing thing. Although, you know, I gotta say, when Christina Wong, who made this group, Facebook page, put this together, she didn't think any of this stuff. She just put this Facebook group together back in the very beginning of the shutdown because she needed to find elastic to make masks. So she wasn't like thinking about what the name meant or how we were all related. You know, it was just like, where can I find some elastic? I'm making a Facebook group. And it took us like a month or two to realize that the acronym for Auntie Sewing Squad is actually maybe sort of inappropriate for some people. But now we've embraced it, and we are very ass positive. So
I saw there's a book that maybe isn't quite out yet, a University of California Press book of essays on the Auntie Sewing Squad Guide to Mask Making, Radical Care and Racial Justice. Do you want to elaborate on radical care and
radical care? You know, it's sort of the same idea as like mutual aid, right? You know, you just are reaching out beyond your immediate family or circle of friends and helping out people who A, maybe don't have any relationship to you, and B, who are not going to give you anything in exchange. So it's not transactional. You know, you just give whatever you can. You know, it's kind of a philanthropic or whatever you want to call it, altruistic, right? And I think I really know that a lot of us really like that idea because when you're feeling like anxious and depressed, if you help someone else out, it really makes you feel better. So I feel like during the pandemic, we were all so stressed out and anxious and depressed that this was kind of a way to help us out as well. So maybe that was what we got out of it, is we actually got a little bit of therapy out of it. But we weren't expecting money, right? We weren't expecting any compensation. We weren't expecting anything. So that's the idea of radical care, right? Yeah. And that's why the film title is also the same. Yeah.
That's good. Thank you. I'll go up to Drew for like a different place in the world, a different community, and try and unpack a little bit about this film in terms of your jacket and the marred Super 8 footage and this event in a friend's life, and how they all become connected even though they're not really that. Can you talk about how your memory of this event helped you structure the film?
The first shot, which is, I don't know, probably too long. It's like, but it's a shot that I shot right after the conversation that sparked the rest of the story. And I don't know why I did it. I just thought that the jacket looked nice. And admittedly, I'm concentrating on pretty like things in my life that I walk around with all the time, that actually when I have moments like that where I stop and I think, I mean, they're possessions, right? They're material things, and you know, they're not the most important things that we have in our lives. But when you have moments of pause and you stop to like look at something and actually think, wow, where did that come from? I mean, it's part of the process you would do with like labor, like where is something that I'm consuming? Where did it come from? Who created this? Why is it here? Why is this in my life? So I started looking at the jacket and just thinking, wow, and how that's, I mean, it's kind of lame. Like it's like a silly jacket that I don't even really fit into anymore, but how it tied into a personal narrative about like an interest in filmmaking, which gets back to your first question. And then looking around and just saying like, wait a minute, this plays a part in this, and here's this gift that I got from my family, acknowledging that I was trying to do something creative, and how it led to this accident with like hand processing film. And so the film is really just me trying to piece it all together myself. It's like and in a disparate, just fractured narrative, personal narrative. So.
Well, looking at it again, and I enjoyed thinking about it, about these connections between the objects, the light, the memories, and the how we come to understand by the end more than we thought we knew when we were watching the rest of the film.
Yeah, it's the construction of it was interesting. I was asked to kind of explain it from start to finish, and I think all the visual material, I started with the images first and then like constructed the narrative. I wrote out the story separately and then kind of brought them together. But I had the advantage of the fact that like there's actually like a somewhat of a climax, or like having this conversation with your best friend about like, I made a mistake with something that's pretty inconsequential, but now takes on more meaning because of where you're at. And look at us, we're a couple of idiots kind of, but also insofar as we're friends and part of the bond of like something with masculinity, or just like, let's be accountable to this. And I'm going to hold you accountable for something in your life, and you can hold me accountable for being negligent in a kind of more of a metaphorical way. But that was, if that makes sense, that was kind of the thought process. And that was the literal conversation that I allude to later on in the film.
Yeah, it's a lovely sort of reconciliation of all of these things. I also like the part about the memory. I think you've talked about how you remember what the light was like when something happened, or we remember where we,
Thank you. And that was just natural. I don't know. It literally did. So I wrote it down. But thank you.
Oh yeah. And Alisi, do you want to say anything more about animism, shamanism, and the human relationship? We showed your film Utah Homeland in Film Fest DC, and it showed many other places. It's also about people and land, but with a different exploration of ideas about diaspora, homeland, and deportations of people. But kind of your view of human environmental harmony as seen in the film, or not seen in the film, either way.
Oh, thank you for having me at the festival again. Thank you. So my last film, that was back in 2017, you're right. It's about the deportations of the ethnic minorities and the indigenous peoples by the Soviet Union, by the USSR during World War II. And then a lot of them died because of the deportations before they were allowed to return home many years later. So that was that film. It was also animated. And that one was based on interview, but at the end I really struggled and I removed the interview completely. So that film didn't have any dialogue, but it was based on what they told me. And then this film, the one that I'm showing this year, called The Fourfold, it was the first time I did subtitle. It was the first time I had dialogue in my film for the first time, because I realized that my grandmother told me lots of details that I cannot just have images showing or text. So so this time I had to show it. And my grandmother, she used to live as nomad on the Mongolian grassland. And so how she, when she was young, she had a different human nature relationship. She had a completely different setting, like how human relate to nature from where I come from. So I learned a lot from her. But for me, like I consider that me and many people in my generation are very privileged, sitting in a home and then just talking about climate change as a theory, or talking about it, like imagining it. But actually the indigenous people, not only in Mongolia or Siberia, but also in Canada, for example, Inuit, they are the people that firsthand experiencing what is happening like every day, like climate change, environmental change, pollution, all that. So and then I talked to my grandmother, so I learned so much from what she told me, like animistic way, like respecting nature. But in this way, animistic is more about new animism, how humans are interconnected with other beings and many person. But the person is not just like human-looking person, but like, for example, rock person, plant person. How humans are interconnected in this big network and relationality. So yeah, that's what I learned, and I was very inspired, and I think it's very relevant in our contemporary time.
Could you mentioned William Kentridge. Could you talk a little bit about your process, which is pretty amazing, and it is different from his, where he's erasing, he's using charcoal, and then he makes his animation by erasing a drawing and then drawing over it a little bit different and shooting. But and your process is different. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then your materials? I have to say, I love the trees.
Oh, so yeah, I as a student in animation, that was about a long time ago when I just started in film school, and I saw his work. I think William Kentridge really drew and animated on one piece of paper, and the camera was at the fixed place, and drawing was at the same fixed place. So he drew, and then erase, and then take a picture, and then you could see the traces of his labor. The time, it's like a time-lapse photography of drawing. And then when I saw it, I also did lots of experiments. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to use colors. At the beginning, it didn't work. And then I had to use different materials. And finally, I think it somehow worked finally. Maybe because I tried so many times. And then I used different colors. It's still the same. The technical is the same principle. Just I always paint on the same piece of paper and take a picture and then paint on the top of each frame. So some people would ask me, oh, by the end of the film, you would have thousands of paintings. I said, no, I just have one. And then at the end, it's destroyed because that's the background of the credits.
It's an amazing process. It has amazing results. Yeah. We'll go back to Jessica and maybe talk a little bit about your kind of neo-realist experimentation with the cast.
Oh, yes, I'd love to. Well, I personally, the way I make films, I like to experiment with structure, and I like to experiment with different structures of films, because like this is the first time I've made a sort of a child-focused film, for example. But yeah, I mix like actors with non-actors. So of course, there's my grandma, who is not an actress, Patricia Reed, and she's actually blind. So you can't tell from the movie, but like she's actually blind, and so I had to, tell her lines and sort of coach her through it and it's in a very different way that you coach actors. Like the main boy who played Tyshawn, Felix Alexis, he is an actor, but he was also like relatively new to acting, and he was also a preteen and 12, and so there are jitters there. So there's a lot of, when working with different types of actors, there's a lot of sort of give and take and experimentation. And even within the script itself, there's sort of improvisational conversations through the chemistry of the characters. So for example, the scene where Tyshawn's father, Sean, comes home with his bike and he's with his friends, while they're talking, that's an improvisational conversation. And when Tyshawn comes and sees his father and they do the handshake, that's something that they made up on their own, because I just, one of the projects that I told the actors to do, I said, just go play basketball together. Like, I'm not going to be there. Just go hang out with each other, go get to know each other. And they came up with that handshake and they are like on their own, and there's other improvisational things, but not improv in the fact of like we just set the camera there. It was in the script that there's this sort of transitional piece, and they were given the structure of what the scene is and where everything is placed.
Thank you. I go and ask Valerie. So
Yes.
what's happening with this film and the Auntie Sewing Squad now? And
Well, I mean, there's sort of, we're trying to think of our retirement. We're trying to see if we can actually stop making masks. Of course, there are still a lot of communities that need face masks, like farm workers, for instance. They go through so many masks a day, and they not only need it for COVID, but like for smoke when there's the fires in California, just general dust and so forth. So I feel like if people want to keep making masks, then they certainly can. But we're hoping that we eventually will get to retire. I am trying to make a longer doc about this too, and just focus in on some more of the stories of some of the folks who were involved and whose lives were really transformed by the experience. Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about your kind of collaging of images in this, of the beautiful fabrics that it's a working, and why you were doing that with this?
Yeah, I mean, I have a background in experimental films, so I really kind of like the chance to get away from doing like a really straightforward documentary, which is not really my style anyway. And since all the material, most of the footage was shot by somebody else, that was kind of fun to play with that. Because I did a lot of earlier stuff that was all like found footage and mashups of other people's footage. So this is really not unlike that. Is taking something that somebody else shot and making it flow with something somebody else shot, right? And so that was kind of cool. Kronos Quartet did the soundtrack, and they actually are the people who approached us first. And so they provided the soundtrack, and then I cut to that piece of music that they had, which was really gorgeous. And so it was just a really nice exercise in editing for me. My last few films the last film I made was a feature doc, and I definitely did not edit that. So to go back to editing my own projects was pretty fun. And it was fun to do because it was the middle of the pandemic, right? Last June, July-ish. And so, I mean, we're all stuck in our house anyway. I'll just make a movie. I'll edit a film. So.
I like that attitude. Maybe the last question for Drew is, can you tell us how you came up with this title?
First of all, if this is my last chance to speak in this, I want to say that I watched all of my fellow participants' films, and I adored all of them. So thank you. I was really honored to be included in this program. So I appreciate that. The title is a secret, so I can't reveal where it comes from, but it was a joke. It was I will say, no, I can't say where.
No, don't say. You see, it's like, I think you've said it's an Easter egg.
Yes, it's an Easter egg, and it's from a popular Goofy movie that you probably
don't
wouldn't
say.
expect.
Don't say. I found it. I looked at it.
Okay.
Would you like to say anything else about your own film? Because we're just moving really fast. Yeah.
No, I appreciate it so much. Thank you for including it in this,
I really,
this program.
yeah. It was really like we love these films, Juliet and I do. We looked at them a lot. Have I missed anything important from anybody else or last? There's many more things to say, but hopefully we'll pique people's interest and they will think about some of them themselves.
Yeah, I watched all the movies too, and it was really fun to see the different, the variety of films that you programmed too was really great. So I hope that people will keep watching short films and keep supporting them.
Alisi from Germany, where you're studying for a PhD.
Yeah, actually, I'm in Potsdam. It's like right beside Berlin, but yeah. I live in Berlin, so yeah.
Jessica, any final thoughts?
Please, everyone, just keep supporting films in general, just all films, showing of short films, micro short films, films from abroad. Just please keep supporting films. I think it's important for the culture.
It is. I agree. with that. I agree with all of that. Thank you. Thank you all so much for taking this time with us, and for, I'm sorry we couldn't talk to everybody for an hour at least. But here we are. That's the world we're in. Thank you, people, for watching. I hope you enjoyed meeting these filmmakers, and we'll take a look
Thank
at
you
their
so
wonderful
much,
work.
Linda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.